The hearings got ugly. Are you stupid? The man called an architect of Obamacare said over and over again the American voters were stupid. Now he's backing up. He's apologizing. I'm so sorry. My comments were thoughtless and on and on. But it's just another political disaster for the Democrats.
That's right. Jonathan Gruber went before Congress Tuesday, and he's still defending the Obamacare law he helped put together. Heather Sells has the story.
Both political parties had a special fury for Jonathan Gruber, all based on comments he made about Obamacare, which spread across the internet.
You know, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever. But basically, that was really, really critical to getting the thing to pass.
You made a series of troubling statements that were not only an insult to the American people, but revealed a pattern of intentional misleading the public about the true impact and nature of Obamacare.
As far as I can tell, we are here today to beat up on Jonathan Gruber for stupid, I mean absolutely stupid, comments he made over the past few years.
Gruber's comments, said Ranking Democratic Committee member Elijah Cummings, were a PR gift to Republicans wrapped with a bow.
Mr. Gruber, in a strange way, I kind of appreciate what you said in the videos, because it seems to me for the first time someone came clean and told the truth.
Gruber, for his part, apologized repeatedly.
It's never appropriate to make oneself seem more important or smarter by demeaning others. I knew better, I know better, I'm embarrassed, and I'm sorry.
But Gruber also insisted he was unqualified to comment on the politics behind the legislation he helped to craft.
I'm not a politician, nor a political advisor.
Republicans weren't buying it, and they pressed him to detail just how much he was paid to help put together the president's health care plan.
What I'm asking you is, how much money did the taxpayers, state or federal, pay you to have you then lie to them? That's what I want to know.
During some 5 hours on the hot seat, Gruber worked hard to promote the legislation he helped to create.
I behaved badly, and I'll have to live with that. But my own inexcusable arrogance is not a flaw in the Affordable Care Act.
Plenty of Americans have already found the flaws, however. The latest Gallup poll shows a record low 37% approve of Obamacare, while a record high 56% disapprove. It's one reason why the Democrats took such a beating in this year's midterm elections, why Democrat Senator Charles Schumer now calls passing Obamacare a mistake, and why all this political theater surrounding Jonathan Gruber only magnifies what has become a big political problem for the Democrats. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Just think of that thing. Nancy Pelosi, we've got to pass it so we can find out what's in it. I mean, that was unbelievable. They didn't have a clue. And that's what Gruber knew, that he could pull the wool over the American taxpayer, over their eyes, and obfuscate all the details, and nobody knew what was in the law, 2,300 pages of whatever, of gobbledygook. Nobody knew. And yet they passed it. Not one single Republican voted for it. It was strictly a Democrat move. It was Obama's signature legislation. Now it's falling apart because it was an attempt to control 1/6 of the economy by a government mandate, and it isn't working. Now, is politics going to trump the security of the United States? And the answer is, of course it will. Politics trumps everything. Now, some years ago, years and years ago, the CIA had some enhanced interrogation techniques. Some seemed to be a little harsh and some brutal. But nevertheless, the Congress, including Dianne Feinstein, were briefed and informed precisely of what was going on. And right after 9/11, the United States was in a mode where they didn't want to have a thing like that happen again. And so several major plots were destroyed. Now, just before the Democrats lose control of the Senate, just before that, they have to rush out with an ill-conceived intelligence study that discredits the CIA but lays open CIA operatives all around the world for potential retaliation. And former intelligence executives are blasting the Senate Democratic report, calling it biased and destructive. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Here's John.
Pat, that report argues the CIA's harsh interrogation methods did nothing to make America safer after the 9/11 attacks. But President Obama's own CIA director is still defending the now-banned methods, saying they did prevent terror attacks and save lives. The tactics included sleep deprivation, waterboarding, and other harsh treatment of terrorism suspects. But Democrats and one key Senate Republican are supporting the release of the report. Senator John McCain was tortured while in captivity during the Vietnam War.
I know from personal experience that the abuse of prisoners will produce more bad than good intelligence.
The interrogations of CIA detainees were absolutely brutal, far worse than the CIA represented them to policymakers and others.
But Republicans disagree, saying the report doesn't really do any good.
This particular release, in my judgment, serves no purpose whatsoever other than to endanger Americans around the world.
It will endanger CIA personnel, sources, and future intelligence operations.
Former intelligence officials, including 3 previous CIA directors, have created a website to criticize the report called CIASavedLives.com. You can find a link to that site and the Senate report on CBNNews.com. Lois Lerner met with election officials from the Justice Department just a month before the 2010 midterm elections when she was still an official at the IRS. That revelation comes from Judicial Watch, a conservative watchdog group. The Justice Department has withheld more than 800 pages of documents in the Lerner investigation, citing, quote, taxpayer privacy and deliberative privilege. Judicial Watch says the Justice Department cannot be trusted to investigate IRS abuses because, quote, these new documents dramatically show how the Justice Department is up to its neck in the scandal. Pat, no mincing words there.
Well, it's an absolute shock. It's a horror to think that the IRS, which we have to trust, the IRS has power to look into all of your private documents, know everything you're doing, and if you withhold them, you can be held guilty of obstruction of federal inquiries and so forth. But the thing is, Lois Lerner lied repeatedly, and then she invoked the Fifth, and she's going to get away with it unless somebody holds her to account. But the fact that she was in collusion with the Justice Department that's supposed to prosecute these things, and the IRS is now teamed up with justice people to figure out who they can prosecute. That's what they wanted. It wasn't just that they wanted to deny tax exemption. They wanted to prosecute some of the Tea Party people so that they would be totally discredited. And it was kind of like scorched earth. Now, that's the way the liberals do when they get control. But what are the Republicans going to do to exact the necessary penalties on that woman and on those who are participating? And the idea that they would claim executive privilege or confidentiality of those documents is nonsense. The United States Congress should get it. Darrell Issa seems to be doing a pretty good job with his committee, but somebody needs to do it. And we cannot allow that just to be swept under the rug. John.
Pat, no government shutdown this year. Republicans and Democrats have agreed on a spending bill that would avoid a shutdown and delay a tough political battle between the new Republican majority in Congress and President Obama over his executive action on illegal immigrants. That showdown is still expected to happen, though, but not until next year after the GOP officially take over. Republicans did make some other important moves in the spending bill, like cutting $60 million from the Environmental Protection Agency. Conservatives have criticized the president for using the EPA to carry out what they call a radical, job-killing environmental agenda that they say hurts the economy. The spending bill is more than 1,600 pages long, and a vote is expected tomorrow. Senate Republicans are debating whether to keep the so-called nuclear option now that they're in control. Democrats changed the rules while they were in charge so that it no longer takes 60 votes to break a filibuster over most presidential nominees. That gives the majority party in the Senate much more power to approve or block a president's nominees for judges and cabinet members. When outgoing Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid changed the rules, it let Democrats approve the president's request for judges, which, Pat, has had a major impact on the federal judiciary.
I was agonizing when outstanding secondary court, appeals court nominees were rejected by the Senate over and over again because of that 60-vote thing. There's nothing in the Constitution that indicates you have to have 60 votes to confirm anybody, but at least in terms of judicial nomination. But the Democrats insisted on it. They used it skillfully. And guys like Miguel Estrada and people like that who are outstanding lawyers were denied appointments to the appeals courts because the Democrats knew what would happen. If you put a man like him into the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, he would be in a stepping stone into the Supreme Court, and he would be an ideal candidate. And they knew that, so they wanted to shoot those guys down before they got to that point where they would be considered as Supreme Court justices. Seems like to me the Republicans have been given a gift by the Democrats, and they ought to say thank you very much and keep the gift. John.
Pat, the Philippines is recovering after Typhoon Hagupit ripped through parts of the country this weekend. Thousands of homes were destroyed and at least 22 people were killed. Lucille Talusan reports on how CBN Disaster Relief is lending a helping hand to those in need after the wake of the monster storm.
Typhoon Hagupit lingered for 3 days in the Philippines, leaving at least 21 people dead and affecting 2 million people. Areas that were ravaged by the monster Typhoon Haiyan last year were hit again by Hagupit. But because CBN Disaster Relief staff are still helping rebuild these areas, they were able to respond quickly to victims of Hagupit as donations of relief poured in.
They are the volunteers from the different local partners of CBN Disaster Relief, and they've been here even before the storm, repacking bags of rice to be distributed to the different affected areas.
Even within 24 hours after the storm hit, we have people on the ground feeding, giving relief, and doing medical missions.
One key factor for the low incidence of casualties and injuries is the preparedness of the people, whereby CBN Disaster Relief was very much a part of. In one community, CBN Disaster Relief staff led some 200 people to seek refuge in a cave. Typhoon survivors are grateful for the different CBN Disaster Relief projects that are very useful in the aftermath of the storm. Wells and water chlorinators have already been in place, and which now provide clean water for them. Recipients of the houses that CBN provided for the victims of Typhoon Haiyan are very happy that these houses withstood the strong winds and rains brought about by Hagupit. As more affected areas are identified in the days ahead, CBN Disaster Relief will continue to meet the needs of the typhoon survivors, especially that Christmas is just a few days away. Lucille Talusan, CBN News, Manila.
Pat, a very grateful and resilient people there in the Philippines.
Well, they're wonderful people, and we love them. And that was the first overseas country that we began broadcasting a daily show with, the Philippines. And they have been our friends for so many years. But it's so nice that Operation Blessing and CBN Disaster Relief had teams in place, right, ready to go when this hurricane was in the offing, and they were able to help evacuate people, save thousands of lives. And it's just one more example of what could be done. If you want to do something really nice this Christmas, that would be something you could do. It's Disaster Relief Fund, CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463. You could sit down and write a check and say, I want to help you help those poor people.
More religious organizations are challenging the birth control mandate in Obamacare. A group of faith-based nonprofits told the Denver 10th Circuit Court of Appeals they should be treated like houses of worship and shouldn't have to file papers that express their religious objection. Former Miss America and actress Ann Mobley has died from breast cancer. Mobley was Miss America in 1959 and acted in TV shows like General Hospital and Perry Mason. She also co-starred in movies with Elvis Presley and Jerry Lewis. She met her husband, Gary Collins, on the movie set as well. Mobley often talked about her Christian faith while in college at the University of Mississippi. The Clarion Ledger newspaper reports she wore a mustard seed necklace, a reference to Luke chapter 17, verse 6, where Jesus talks about the power of faith, even as small as a mustard seed. Mobley was 77 years old. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.